Ya udah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we from Group 2 will present about the result of our advanced organic practicum. The isolation organic compound in Pulai leaves, Alstonia Scholaris. Next. The members of our group are Badrus Sholeh, I am Azza Zarwanda, Holipah, Muhammad Husnul Wafa, Argo Iswandoko, Nurul Fitriatus S, Talitha Rahma S, Muhammad Zaki Imam, Alfianita Nuril Hidayaty, and Hafiz Tauhid. Next. In this presentation, we will explain you about background of our practicum, research methodology, discussion and interpretation of characterization, and the last is conclusion. Next. First, I am Azza Zarwanda. I will explain you about the background of our practicum. Next. One of the plants in Indonesia that is used as a medicinal plant is the Pulai plant. Milk diseases such as fever, cough, diabetes, malaria, and kidney stones have been treated with the Pulai plant. The leaves of the Pulai plant have anti-diabetic antioxidant. The most dominant content in some parts of Pulai plants is alkaloid. As the word of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in Surah Asy-Syu'ara verse 7. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Awalam yarau ilal ardi kam ambatna fiha min kulli zawjin karim. And do they not pay attention to the earth? How much do we grow on the earth as kinds of good plants? According to Muyassar 2007 interpretation, how do they deny Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and do not observe the earth that has been created by Him? How did Allah create various plants, or plants and fruits of different colors and shapes? This is proof of the power of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, which make Him the right to be worshipped. In the word of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, or the first above, lafaz karim is a lafaz which describes something good for each object that is characterized. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has grown various kinds of plants with benefits for His creators. Okay, the next presentation will explain by Holipah.
Okay, I'm Holipah. I will explain about the background of Pulai. On the back of Pulai, the nation has entered disease as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Hadith Bukhari. حدثنا محمد بن المثنى حدثنا وهب الزبير حدثنا عمر بن أبي حسين قال حدثني عطاء بن أبي رباح عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما أنزل الله داء أنزله شفاء. Meaning, having taken as Muhammad bin al-Musanna, had as Abu Ahmad az-Zubayri, had as Umar bin Sa'id bin Abu Hussein, he said, has taught me Atha bin Abu Rabah from Abu Hurairah radhiallahu anhu, from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Allah will not bring down a disease but lower the medicine too. Yes. The purpose of this study was to isolate alkaloid compounds in platelets by identifying them using CLC. Those to get the best O1 for alkaloid extraction in platelets. Based on the backgrounds, because alkaloid extract obtained will be tested for phytochemistry using reagent tests and similarly chromatography to determine the alleged content of alkaloid compounds in platelets. Then identify using UV-based FCIR, HNMR, and PMS.
Research methodology. Next. Wait, sorry. Time and place of implementation was held in April-May 2020 at the Organic Chemistry Laboratory and instrument of the Faculty of Science and Technology Win Maulana Malik Ibrahim Malang. Next. And this is the tools what we need for this research. A lot of tool. Next. And there are material for this research. Next. Okay, work step. The first sample preparation. Pulai leaves are washed thoroughly, then cut into small pieces and dried. The dried Pulai leaves are then blended and sifted until they get a fine powder. Okay, next step is maceration extraction. Macerated samples were extracted using ethanol 95% and soaking was carried out for 24 hours with shaker using a shaker at a speed of 120 rpm. Filtered the drag, extracted again using ethanol with the same treatment until a colorless filtrate was obtained. Then the filtrate is concentrated using rotary evaporator. The next step is isolation of alkaloid. Isolation of alkaloid compound. 20-gram sample was dissolved using 2% of 50 milli sulfuric acid and then add 15 milli of diethyl ether for fat loss. The water fraction is taken and alkalized using sodium hydroxide as much as 25 milli, then extracted using chloroform. The chloroform fraction was concentrated by using a rotary evaporator. Next step is phytochemical test. 0.5 gram of extract was taken and 5 milli of hydraulic acid was added. Then the filtrate is divided into the different test tube. The first test tube was added with Dragendorf reagent and the other test tube was added with Mayer reagent. Okay, next.
Okay, next step for monitoring using TLC. It was carried out with a KLT plate and analyzed by UV light to obtain the RF value. Next step is identification of compounds using a UV vis spectrophotometer. It's analyzed at a wavelength of 200 to 8,000 nanometer because it was suspected that there were alkaloid compounds in the isolate. Next step is identification of compounds using a FCIR spectrophotometer. Its KBR plates were analyzed using FCIR instruments with a wave number of 4,000 to 400 centimeter. And next, identification of compounds using an NMR spectrometer. The isolate was dissolved with CTCl3 solvent in an NMR container, then the resulting NMR spectra were analyzed. And the next step, identification of GCMS spectrometer. These isolates were entered into the GCMS instrument and further analyzed, and MS will show the specific analysis result at S chromatogram peak point. Okay, next. Hafiz Tauhid to explain.
Okay, and the next I want to explain about discussion and interpretation of characterization. Next. Firstly, sample preparation. The Pulai leaf are then cut into small pieces to encourage the surface are so as to speed up the drying process and makes blushing easier. Furthermore, the sample is dried under direct sunlight for +- 14 days, and then the purpose of drying is to reduce the moisture content of the material to a limit where the development of microorganisms and enzymes activity that can cause spoilage is inhibited or stops. And then sample that have been drying greenish brown as mashed using a blender to obtain a sample powder that's small and fine zest. This iron to facilitate the extraction process. The simplia powder that has been refined is then shaved using its extensive this iron to maximize in minimizing this variation. And the next about maceration extraction of Pulai. The dry powder of Pulai leaf is weighed separately as much as 115 grams divided into 3 parts each of 15 grams, put into 1000 milliliter aluminum cups to facilitate the extraction process. Maceration extraction as a sample which 95% ethanol as much as 35 milliliter per 15 grams of sample. The sample was immersed for 24 hours with 3 hours of shaking using a shaker at a speed of 120 rpm. During the maceration process, the cell was and then enter the cavity cytoplasma of cell containing secondary metabolic compound. Secondary metabolic compound will dissolve due to the difference in concentration between the solution of secondary metabolic compound inside and outside the cell. This results in hypertonic fluids that will enter the hypotonic fluid so that there is a balance. And the next.
Isolation of alkaloid from Pulai leaf. The thick extract of Pulai leaf is added with H2SO4 H2SO4 to pH2. H2SO4 function to withdraw alkaloid and from alkaloid salt and increase the solubility of alkaloid in water. Alkaloid rich with strong acid to from alkaloid salt. This type of reaction can be carried out in order to separate alkaloid from natural substrates that are solubility in water. Next. The shaking is done so that the ethyl acetate solvent is in perfect contact with the acid solution, so the wax and fat compound can be taken according to the properties of the ethyl ether solvent, and ammonium hydroxide is at to pH 12. The addition of NH4OH function to free alkaloid from their salt due to the addition of acid. Next. Such as much as
0.5 gram of the extract was added with 5 ml of 1% HCl to extract the alkaloid because the alkaloid are alkyne and then filtered to get the filtered test tube 1 add 2 drop fragrance in test tube 2 was add 2 until 3 drops of Meragen. Next, Afau.
Next, manually monitoring using TLC. As for the result from the three main fractions, including fraction A 0.1676 grams, fraction B 0.1764 grams, and fraction C 0.1398 grams. The picture is as follows. Okay, Nurul.
Okay, it was me, Talitha. Wait. Of alkaloid compounds with a UV phase spectrophotometer. There is a spectrum of UV phase of alkaloid compound. We can see that there are 4 peaks in the spectrum. Of the 4 peaks, there are 2 highest peaks. Of the 4 peaks, there are 2 highest peaks, which can be interpreted as the maximum wavelength with a wavelength of 253 nanometers and 352 nanometers. The next is identification of alkaloid compounds with a FTIR spectrophotometer. There is a spectrum FTIR of alkaloid compounds. There is the interpretation is can see at the following explanation. With the example is wave number of 3448.72 centimeter minus 1 is OH stretch vibration, and 1627.92 centimeter minus 1 vibration C double bond with N, which was strengthened by absorption 1103.28 centimeter minus 1, which is a symmetrical C and binding vibration with CO, stretching vibration. The next explanation will explain it by Nurul.
Okay, the next is identification of alkaloid compound with a GCMS spectrophotometer. From the analysis using GCMS spectrophotometer, we are obtained as known from the spectra. Several compounds were obtained, namely is neopetidine, hexadecanoic acid, pyethol linoleic acid, stigmasterol, and squalene, and with the details as in the table. Next, identification of alkaloid compound with a HNMR spectrophotometer. The chemical shift in the delta 1.25 ppm region contain a singlet peak with a high intensity of CH3 proton whose number has not been determined, and the chemical shift in the 1.38 until 2.35 ppm region, there is a multiplied peak of CH probably indicates of the presence of the CH and CH2 proton that from the aliphatic ring of piperite. The next is a conclusion.
This is our conclusion. Okay, friend. After discuss the research result, and now we come the conclusion of this study with conclusion that conclusion for the based on the experiment, it can be called that alkaloid compound can be isolated in the initial state. Cause namely extraction the isolate using the maceration method with 25% ethanol solvent, which is then purified by monitoring using TLC. The result of isolation using maceration technique obtained a yield of 0.37%. The result of the identification alkaloid compound in Pulai leaf are indole compound. There be in to next presentation session. Okay, thanks guys. I'll be in to next presentation session and for the to next. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.